So, yes, we got off a little bit rough with some technical issues tonight, but we're going to plow on through. We were really pushing for the open lines tonight, but it looks like that may not happen, so we'll keep you posted. So that said, going into the second hour, if by then we have the open lines open, believe me, I will let you know, and I will invite you all in, because what I really wanted to do on this last episode live on 2019 was to hear from you, what you took away from this year in the paranormal and ufology. And I haven't really heard much of a chance of your own stories to be shared. You've called in, you've asked guest questions, and we love that. But you're part of this family, you're part of this community, and I really wanted to have a conversation with you. So hopefully we'll do that. When we do, I'll get the number out. If not, fear not, because we have Carole Carle joining us later. And those of you who knows Carole Carle, she is the host of Behind the Obsidian Curtain on KGRA Radio, one of the best, if not the best, voice in radio. My first guest, Mac Barnes, returning Star Wars champion. He's coming up in just a moment, and we are going to discuss the Rise of Skywalker. Please share your thoughts and experiences with us during or after the show on Facebook.com/ParanormalNowRadio, Instagram @ParanormalNow, Twitter @Paranormal_now. And hey, since the phone lines aren't open, hopefully I'll catch you in the KGRA chat room where you can post your questions, share your thoughts. I will do my best to keep an eye on that, and we'll bring that into the fold as we go tonight. Right before we were going live tonight, forget about technical issues in one studio. I was having issues in my own spot here, and I had to reboot my whole computer system. I had audio troubles, and finally got that working. And then we had a last-minute guest cancellation at the beginning of the show. We were going to go over the UFO monument, Tom Reed UFO monument, but we can't do that now. And while that was happening, I was having a conversation with Bill Skywatcher, the producer at KGRA, on the other nights where Race isn't working, and he and I were doing a Coffee and UFOs episode. So it was just like back-to-back madness today. But that was a really fun conversation I had with Bill, so I'll get that Coffee and UFOs episode posted within a couple of days, so look out for that. And that's on the Paranormal Pop YouTube channel. So youtube.com/paranormalpop. Mac Barnes. Mac, welcome back to Paranormal Now.
Thank you, my friend. It's always good to be back here on the show. I love coming on here. I know I say that every single time, and it probably sounds like you're just playing a rerun of my voice, but nah, I love talking about nerdy stuff with you, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Look, this is a paranormal, speculative, ufological program. But, like I've said before, the vast majority of us that are into this stuff, we love science fiction. We love comics, books and characters and mythology. It's just, I think, built into our DNA because we're curious people. And one of those biggest franchises out there, obviously, is Star Wars. For so many of us, it's not just another science fiction series. I mean, look, like I think there are passionate people about the Alien series or Terminator franchise, right? But there's literally nothing as emotional as the Star Wars fan base.
You got that right, my friend. I think the reason behind that is a lot of people, Star Wars is one of those things where, unlike Alien versus Predator, or unlike, what was the other example you used?
Terminator.
Yeah. Terminator, that kind of throws a monkey wrench in what I was about to say. I was going to say Alien versus Predator is so far off that it's hard to relate to. We can relate to the human characters in it, but actually what's going on. And very often, the Yautja, which is the proper name for the Predator, and the Xenomorphs, which is the proper name for the aliens, both of them, it's so hard they're the core of that series, just like the Terminator himself. Is the core of that series. And so those characters are harder to relate to. But if you look at Star Wars, the core of all of those characters, the core that I'm talking about is, in the originals, Luke, Leia, Han, even Darth Vader, who was once a man, though he's now machine more than man. They're people, so they're easy for us to relate to. They have relationships, they have ups and downs, and you see how a lot of things affect them and how they would also affect us in the same similar ways. So I feel like one of the biggest things that, makes Star Wars such just a reachable, it has, it touches people all across the world, regardless of, religion, sex, color, everything, it touches so many people's lives, and it's such a family thing because I feel like it's so easy to relate to, and it's so you can put yourself in that universe.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would disagree with a little bit is in the Terminator franchise. I think you're right. Unlike Alien or Predator, it's less emotional than Star Wars, but not because the Terminator is a machine, but I think because there are only really two solid films in that franchise, and I think the core of the franchise is actually Sarah Connor and John Connor. I was excited for Terminator, whatever Fate, the one that was coming out recently, because Sarah Connor was coming back. I haven't seen it yet, but literally, Linda Hamilton was the only reason I wanted to see that movie. Arnold's awesome, that's cool, but it was her story that I was like, yeah, I want to see what happens next.
Right. I get that. I've never been like a really, really big Terminator kid. I've seen the original movie, and that's all I've seen. So I was kind of speaking, out of the side of my neck a little bit whenever I was talking about Terminator, because as you introduced me, I'm the Star Wars champion, and I know a little bit about other sci-fi areas, but definitely Terminator is about as far. You heard me talking using the specific names of the Predator and the Alien, so I'm even, I'd say I'm about mid-tier knowledge, maybe low mid-tier knowledge about that, but I'd say if I had to, my Terminator knowledge 1 through 10 is probably around like a 2, so definitely not a strong suit of mine.
Well, but I think that also says something about the series as well, because even the most lay person can tell you something about Star Wars, for sure. It's a cultural, it's not just a cultural phenomena that happened in the 70s and 80s, it's enduring. I mean, this is generational, and it's going to pass on again and again. Those original 3 films, in particular, just altered film history forever.
Right. I think one thing that we forget about so much, and what you were saying there about it specifically affecting and basically just sending this revolutionary wave of new films and new effects and things like that. A lot of people forget that not only was Star Wars the first movie of its kind, but a lot of the effects, both practical and the little bit of CGI and things that they were using, the new effect technology that they were using was revolutionary for that time. Like, Lucas didn't just make Lucasfilm, he made Industrial Light and Magic. And Industrial Light and Magic, I found out the other day, I mean, I knew they had worked on other films besides Star Wars and Indiana Jones, the two most prominent films from Lucasfilm, but they've done work for hundreds of films since their creation way back, I assume in 77, the same year Star Wars was made. They've touched so many different movies, and and now that I know that, I wonder if George Lucas didn't make Industrial Light and Magic and wasn't so pioneering with creating that new company to be an specifically, an effects and sound company, that we wouldn't have some of the same great movies that not only do we have now, but in the 80s and then in the 90s and then in the early 2000s. It was just a chain reaction that, just almost was like a bomb went off in the film industry, like I said, especially in the effects department.
No, you're absolutely right. Was Jurassic Park, was that Industrial Light and Magic?
I wouldn't be surprised that if they did work on it, but I'm not sure how many hundreds of films they've touched. But I know Industrial Light and Magic, like I said, was revolutionary for that time. So almost any kind of movie that would be sci-fi related or need an abundance of effects, more than likely in the late 70s and all of the 80s, probably had, ILM probably had a hand in that work.
Right. All right. So what I'm going to do is, because we're going to talk a little bit about episode 9, which brings all 3 trilogies to an end. And I have to say, personally, Mac, I have never in my life been nervous about a movie coming out. Like, never. Not a single movie. When I go in with an open mind, whatever happens, happens. If I'm disappointed, if I'm happy, that's what it is. With this film, it's been like months, man. Like, I think I need to go to the therapist. You know what I mean? Like, I have some serious issues with this film coming out. I am so nervous that it's not going to tie all of these films together in a way that's respectful to George Lucas and everything that's done before. How do you feel?
Oh, man. I have the same type of butterflies. I think the real reason for my worry necessarily has a lot to do with, episode 7 was directed by J.J. Abrams. And while a lot of people didn't like 7, 7 had just a tablespoon of the amount of dislike or negative feelings that episode 8 brought after Rian Johnson had completed that movie. And a lot of people had seen that because they just kind of almost switched gears 180 degrees from where the movie had left off at the end of episode 7 and what J.J. Abrams had kind of set up 8 to be. Rian Johnson just kind of, like I said, went a completely different direction. And you could see that from the beginning of the movie. One of the scenes I talk about very so often with my friends is there's the scene at the end of The Force Awakens, where Rey has finally made it to Octo and she's handing over the lightsaber to Luke. And if you go back and watch episode 7, when he sees her holding out the lightsaber to him, there's emotion. There is just so he's taken back. There's so many questions that I just imagine are on his mind. Right. How did she get here? How did she find me? How did she find the lightsaber? How does she know how to get where I am? Like, he intentionally exiled himself and just got so far away from everything and disconnected himself most of the way through the Force, so it was hard to find him that way, even if you were Force sensitive. He had just kind of gone to the links of the earth to hide himself. And like I said, he was so emotional that somebody had finally come looking for him, that he had finally gotten brought back into the fight. And then in episode 8, when we get to pick up right, where that scene left off, he just casually grabs the lightsaber and tosses it over his shoulder. And I'm just, oh, man.
Yeah. And
that was more,
I'm with you. I think it was just egregious because I've looked at that scene over and over again, and I'm pretty sure Rian Johnson refilmed that because the look on Luke's face is not the same.
Yeah.
And I was upset about that because I literally thought the end of episode 7, that look that you're talking about on Luke's face, was the most profound acting moment of Mark Hamill's career. Like that's how I felt about it when I saw it in the theater. I was like, holy crap. He is expressing so much in that one glance. It was just so moving. And then I was disappointed as we continued. But we're going to take a quick break, Mac, and we'll come back on the other side and we'll talk more about this. Look, the reviews are already coming in. So we'll talk about that a little bit when we come back on the other side. Some of you may be disappointed. Some of you may be very happy. But we certainly won't give any spoilers away. So stay with us, whether you're dark side or light side, the Alan B. Smith or Paranormal Now. We will be right back.
Your official contact for the best alternative talk on the planet. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. Thank you all for standing by while we get through tonight's technical issues, brought to you by myself and KGRA Radio. Okay, so Mac is back with me, and we're going to discuss the dark and light side of the greatest fiction saga in living history. And before we do that, I'm just going to play audio clip of one of the latest trailers. If that doesn't give you chills, man, I don't know what will. Mac, how do you feel about that one?
Oh man, that the first time I've seen that exact trailer, or I guess it's about a minute long. I've seen that probably 4 or 5 times, and I just can't really wrap my head around it, man. Like, so as of episode 8, Snoke's apparently dead, or at least we think he's dead. But at the same time, this whole time since Return of the Jedi, we've thought Sidious was dead, and we know Vader's already dead.
Right.
Been rumored, been rumored to have Hayden Christensen playing like Anakin, like Force Ghost. Had like supposedly like this half and half Vader, like Anakin Force Ghost is going to pop up potentially in 9. Now I'm not believing any of that. I don't know what to believe, man. I really don't. Like, it's just, I feel like Star Wars has done kind of like just mind-breaking things. I mean, obviously with the whole, no, I am your father. But like ever since then, we really haven't had something that was just like, oh my gosh, no one saw this coming. But I feel like there's the potential either for this to be exactly that, for us to kind of have just this mind-blowing moment that only pales in comparison to the original, Vader revealing to Luke that he's his father. But like I said, there's great potential for this to just kind of be that hook that no one saw coming.
Yeah.
But at the same time, where there's that big chance, there's also a big chance that this could fall flat. And like I said, I really, if I can't kind of work something out of that, then I don't know who can, because I've talked with multiple other sources, people who are on that I would consider on my same level. I can't call them my colleagues because you can't get a degree for this, but like just the people that I talk with that I would say are on the same boat with me, nobody can really figure out what all this means. And I feel like on Thursday, because I'm going the night before Friday to see it, whenever I see it at 9 o'clock and I get out of the theater around 11:15, I'm going to shoot you a text. And it's not going to say anything about spoilers, but I'm going to let you know immediately what I think of this movie. Because I am on pins and needles.
Yeah. Okay, so I signed up for my alert for when tickets were available.
Okay.
And I was going to do it, and then I hesitated, deciding on theater and time. 24 hours later, when I went to look for the seats, everything was sold out. So in our neighborhood, it was just gone. So I was stuck. We didn't want to see it from the flanks of the theater. We want to be dead.
Right.
So we can't go until Saturday now. So I need to avoid the interwebs and social media for the most part. So I'll rely on your text to give me a good sense of what's going on. But I do know that for the world premiere, a lot of the reports that were coming out were mixed, but the majority have been positive. And what I really like, one of the reviews I heard that actually made me quite optimistic was someone said that there are elements of horror.
Ooh.
And people were talking about there are scarier moments, and I thought that's exciting, because if you are going to bring the Emperor back, and make this a darker film, because Star Wars had you on the edge of your seat, and you can feel the shadowy darkness, right, at the dark side. But I've never experienced like true fear in a Star Wars film, like you do in like a horror film.
Yeah, like you're not sitting there sweating or shaking. Like you're kind of just chilling watching your Star Wars movie. Like you said, there's points, which Vader popped up in the original trilogy, or like Darth Maul popped up in Episode 1, and that that's supposed to be like frightening, or that's supposed to be intimidating more so than scary. Yeah,
I don't think JJ is going to drop the ball on this. I have a feeling that even if it's not the best film, it's going to balance out, no pun intended, at least this most recent trilogy.
Right.
And it's interesting. It seems that those who didn't necessarily like The Last Jedi like this one, which I found very interesting.
That's what I like to hear. And I haven't, while I do try and keep myself, you call me the Star Wars encyclopedia, and I keep myself up to date on all the facts and things like that. But when we have, a new episode of The Mandalorian around the corner, when we have a new Star Wars movie around the corner, I try my hardest to stay away from spoilers and stuff, not because I feel like they're going to ruin the movie for me, because I have this philosophy with spoilers that no matter how good of a storyteller or someone describing something you are, I don't feel like you can describe it in a way that the movie is not going to still surprise me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, even if you tell me exactly, like, word for word what happens in a specific scene, I'm not going to know what's the scene that leads up to that. I'm not going to know what happens directly after that. Like, and you may describe the scene itself so poorly that it is, completely different from the way you described it. And then in that case, you would have not have even given me a spoiler, Yeah,
and I agree. There's so much information and misinformation out there that I'm not worried about spoilers necessarily, but some people will be really terrible online. They'll just post an image right on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
A screenshot that they stole from the theater. And then, boom, it's spoiled within a flash of a second. So that's what I'm afraid of seeing online. But Mac, I'm just curious, of all the 8 films so far, who's your favorite character of all time?
My favorite character of all time is definitively Luke Skywalker, only because, and a lot of people look at me because I am such a big Star Wars fan. They're like, "Oh, you're basically like our parents' generation. You're just really, really into 4, 5, and 6." No, I'm really not, to be honest. Because if I was to sit here and rank my Star Wars movies, the episodic ones, part of the Skywalker saga, I would probably have 4 and 5 on my bottom half. Like, if I was to do a top 8 right now, they'd probably be like 5 and 6, on my list. Just because I really, really like 6. 6 is my favorite movie, definitively, because we finally get to see all of the fruits of Luke's labor and like Luke's training. He's basically a Jedi Knight, and he says that to Yoda in Episode 6 when he's in his Yoda's home. He says, "So I am a Jedi," and Yoda just looks at him and he says, "Oh, you think you're a Jedi, but you haven't done what all Jedi are supposed to do." And this obviously isn't verbatim what Yoda said, but I'll give you some of my own knowledge to go along with that little bit of harping back to one of the original movies. The only way you become a Jedi Knight and graduate from your being a Padawan is either A, pass the trials, or B, overthrow a Sith, or just destroy like a Sith or a Sith assassin, like in the case of what Obi-Wan did. Because Maul, a lot of people don't know, Maul at the time of Episode 1 wasn't actually a full-blown Sith. He was just a Sith assassin. So even though his name was Darth Maul, he was kind of a Darth behind the scenes, because during the time of episode 1, Plagueis is still roaming a little bit. Like, it's like, if I understand it correctly, about halfway through episode 1, Plagueis is killed. So Darth Maul actually, for most of that movie, and well, the entire movie, is a Sith assassin. And it's not only until we see him like later in Clone Wars that he, refers to himself as like a formal Darth, even though he was highly disrespected by the Sith and just kind of cast aside by the Emperor originally.
Hey, for everybody listening, Mac is the are you co-owner or owner of Kessel Run Comics?
Technically, I'm co-owner because my dad's my 50-50 partner, but you can call me owner and operator because he's just half of the funds. I do all the work myself, and I'm half of the funds.
Gotcha. So Mac Barnes is the owner and operator of Kessel Run Comics, West Broad Street, Elizabethtown, North Carolina. So if you are in driving distance, you have to go check it out. And Mac, I texted you earlier too. I'm just curious because for me, all these things cross over with what we talk about here on the show. And in the world of comics, I mean, are people big on conspiracy theories? Do they think like how movies, people look at the day the Earth stood still, in E.T. the Extraterrestrial or Close Encounter of the Third Kinds, that these were dissemination of information for slow and soft disclosure from the government. In the comic book world, do people talk about that stuff? Because when you look at the stories, there's a lot of conspiracy theories written into that stuff, and science fiction and speculation.
Oh, well, the comic book market and the comic book audience is just absolutely speckled with spec. I mean, it's one of our favorite things to do as shop owners and just comic book enthusiasts, because there's a lot to speculate on. Say for instance, right now, Amazing Spider-Man is going through this 2099 event right now, where the Spider-Man from 2099 has come to current day and needs regular, like current day Spider-Man's help to overthrow Doom of 2099. And so that whole, anytime there's any kind of big event, and this event, the reason why it's such a big event is because it's not only infecting or is part of the Amazing Spider-Man comic, but it also has a bunch of these one-shot comics: Ghost Rider 2099, Venom 2099, Fantastic Four 2099. There's all these other characters that are getting brought into the mix, and so a lot of people are speculating what if this character shows up, what if that character shows up, how are they going to end this? So-and-so just got taken out of the fight in the last issue. How does that help versus hinder our heroes against Doom 2099? And you hear speculation about comics in this medium before they even come out. Man, I already hear people speculating on the Star Wars #1 comic book and the Darth Vader #1 comic book. Star Wars #1 is going to come out January 1st, and Darth Vader #1 is going to come out in February, I believe, on the 5th. Mm-hmm. But still, so many people are already speculating, what's the third volume of Darth Vader going to explore? Because we've seen kind of like in the first volume, it shows you him getting his bearings of what it's like to, instead of being Anakin Skywalker. Because it only takes place a few months after he's received his new body, and he's only been Darth Vader very, very short time. So the first volume shows what it was like to learn to be Darth Vader. The second volume shows really like him establishing the terror and the intimidation and just, basically bolstering his strength and learning how to be the imposing Sith Lord that he is, like I said, with that new body. And
Go ahead, Mac. Yep.
I was about to say, so many people are speculating what's going to happen. Is there going to be some backlash between him and Sidious in the third volume? Because Vader was, at the end of the second volume, starting to get really chippy and starting to believe that he was stronger than Sidious. And so a lot of people are thinking that in the third volume, there's going to be some sort of either really hardcore, Sithly teaching moment by Sidious to Vader. Not that we haven't seen that one so many times, but I think there's so much potential to show Vader doing so many more things than we ever thought he did, because these comics are bridging those original trilogy movies and giving us extra context. Like, if you're a big Vader fan or a big Star Wars fan, I highly suggest, getting involved in the comics and the novels, because all of the, Marvel's using the comics and novels now to just completely give you any kind of extra context for your beloved characters as you want.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mac, that's it. And actually, anybody listening, if you want to get more of this sort of content, Mac has a podcast called KRC. Oh, it's KRCP, Mac?
Yes, sir.
KRCP. So if you just go to whatever platform you use to subscribe, iTunes or Android, whatever, look under KRCP, or if you type in Kessel Run Comics, it might actually pop up. But that's a good podcast. You guys have a good time talking about all of this stuff that we only touch on once in a while here on the show. And again, go to Elizabethtown, North Carolina to check out Kessel Run Comics and stop in and say hi to Mac. Mac, fingers crossed, man. I'm looking forward to your text.
I look forward to sending you that text.
All right. Have a good night, brother. I appreciate it.
You too. Good night.
All right. So here's the thing. We think, the lines ready to go. So you can call the Paranormal radio app hotline, and that number is 85-KGRA live. 85-KGRA live. In the second hour, I will give you the cue when we open up those lines. I really do want to hear from you. If you have a story, if you need to just sound off and share something that you need to get off your chest about the community, the paranormal, ufological, spiritual, metaphysical, whatever, this is your chance. This is our time together. So let's hang out. Let's do it. And then joining me in the second hour is Carole Carle. And we have quite a number of news topics to cover. And we'll be standing by, both of us, waiting for your calls. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. Stand by. We'll be back.
'Cause I know it's not right when I come home.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
It's a whole new way of life.
Salt Lake City, Utah. Hudson Valley, New York.
The signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight. Back and forth in the mind, repeating conclusions I don't wanna find, 'cause I know it's not right. When I come home to you at the end of the day, just to avoid change one more night, just for one more night.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is your grateful host, Alan B. Smith, and joining me for the second hour is Carole Carle. And of course, again, this is our last chance in 2019, so call in. The number is 85-KGRA live. We will be doing that in about 20 minutes, and I will give you your cue when those lines are officially open. I want to hear what you have to say. Carole, I also want to hear what you have to say. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. And thank you for that compliment about my voice. That is just so gosh darn generous of you. I just, it sort of makes my day. It definitely makes my day. And it's been a crazy day. Right before, well, just about the same time you came on the air, I was hearing some sirens, which kind of is not typical. It's a pretty quiet neighborhood. And then I was hearing chanting, and then I was hearing lots and lots of voices. I couldn't hear what they were chanting, but more units rolled with their sirens on. So I just had to do this. It's me. I called the non-emergency number for the Claremont Police Department. Well, it seems that about 2.5 blocks from me, we're very close to the Claremont colleges. So I'm going to guess that's what generated. There is a demonstration in full progress, shall we say. It's for and against impeachment. And so that's, if you hear anything in the background that leaks through, that will be it.
Well, I'm not sure what's more controversial, that or some of the subjects we'll be talking about tonight.
Exactly. So that's a great segue, Alan. You do that.
Isn't it? I was going to, well, if Race is okay with coming on, I don't know if he's busy producing. I think one of the interesting things that have come up recently is through John Greenwald's work, and he's a fantastic person as far as his research and insistence on getting the truth through the FOIA Acts, Freedom of Information Acts.
Oh, yeah.
Some recent documents seem to show that there really wasn't much in reference during the AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Yeah.
There wasn't much in the documents that used or referenced words like UFO or UAP or actual, what we would consider unidentified flying objects investigated, which seems to, and I'm not making accusations, I'm staying on the fence here.
Right, yes.
It seems to make To the Stars Academy and their narrative seem either misleading or something's missing.
How about misleading, or were they misled?
Yeah.
Isn't that the fun part of this job?
There is. All right.
There's the voice. Oh, my God.
That you are so sweet.
Well, we could hear you read the telephone book and we would be enchanted. So what can I say?
You are precious, and that's why I love you. That's why we all
bless your heart. Right back at you.
I have to add this.
Robin, too.
When Mac was speaking earlier, Race, and he did his Darth Vader voice, I was like, we've got to get Race to do a Darth Vader voice.
Oh, my God.
I'm no good at Darth Vader. I can't do the Darth.
Yeah.
Oh, well, listen, hey, that was just it. So, don't sell yourself short.
When I'm scuba diving in the Caribbean, I'll give it a shot.
There you go.
But I was just about to say, I know folks on both sides of the argument, both sides of the fence on this AATIP to the stars thing.
Right.
And one thing that I just want to remind everybody is this. If we don't have millions of dollars to put our own money up to do the work that needs to be done to uncover the truth, we can get on the internet and bitch, whine, moan, gripe, cry, whatever we want to do all day long. But all it means is we're pissed off because we don't have the money and the finances and the resources to do this ourselves. That's really all you're saying. Because at the end of the day, these guys are in a position to do it regardless what they say, up or down, left or right, black or white. At the end of the day, Tom DeLonge is doing his thing, and he's got a batch of cats from the military. He did come forward. Things were said. Things are done. Things aren't done. And people get upset about it. True enough. And I feel it. But at the end of the day, these guys, Carole may have put, Alan, her finger on something there when she said, or they may have been deceived. I think it's very possible that Tom DeLonge and Luis Elizondo were played a little bit in some of this. When you're dealing with, because see, it's not about alien abduction or getting justice for people who are taken without their permission. It's not about getting reparations for farmers because their crops were screwed up in crop circles or whatever. It's not. This is about aerial threats to them. This is where some of these people, I think, have chosen to go get their money-making,
their piece of the pie.
Their piece of the pie. That you have to know Washington and Capitol Hill language to be able to present things in a way upon which, the powers that be are going to pay attention. They're going to give you,
Right, like our dear sweet Chase Klutsky does. Yeah.
Yes, there's a thing out there called an elevator pitch.
Right.
And they use it a lot in Hollywood. Give me your elevator pitch for a series or a movie. That elevator pitch is a very short, very, very short synopsis of what you want to do and what you're trying to get my attention for.
Right, where they want us to be taken to.
Right.
And that's powerful in any situation.
Right.
Whether it's business, life, whatever.
Right.
If you have the right form of communication that's succinct enough to get your message across and sort of, tease what you want to do, that's enough to get the conversation started.
Right.
But if you go in full throttle and you're just spewing this and that out, when you're tripping over your words.
And I even think that when in regards to the subject of UFOs and UAPs, it's a shorter pitch than an elevator pitch. I think it's like half of an elevator pitch you're allowed to try to get the attention of ranking politicians and so forth. Steve Bassett, as much as I love his tenacity and this whole thing, there's questions that come up with his whole thing. He's got crowdfunding going on. He's raised $10,000 he wants to start a podcast and a website and all this. If I had $10,000, what I could have done with $10,000 to start KGRA, my goodness. But I hear he's even asking for more money in his crowdfunding and his GoFundMe stuff.
Wow.
He's got a young lady that has applied for her lobbyist and lobby license, and if you think that of course he's been doing it for how long, but if you think that talking to politicians as a lobbyist is someone paid to do so for someone else is going to get you there, more power to you. It's never worked before. It's not going to work now. And
do you think it's because there's a lack of passion?
I just think that it's too hard. It's too difficult. There's not enough money constituent-wise behind it to get anyone on Capitol Hill to pay any attention to it. But when you're talking about, I've got 15 people here that were all former military and intelligence officers that will testify under oath that UFOs hovered over this base and started up and shut down our intercontinental ballistic missiles on their own. And we've got evidence to prove it and testimony to prove it. Those son of a bitches are going to start listening in a hurry. Something like that could start the next world war. And it could start a nuclear intercontinental war. Not only a war, but a ballistic missile war. Once countries start to see these missiles that are unannounced raising up into the clouds, they're going to start launching theirs. And they're going to pass each other in the atmosphere, and they're going to come down, and they're going to rain hell on all of us. That is a serious notion that even the stupidest politicians would have to listen to. This all happened at the Press Club in 2001, and shortly thereafter, 9/11 happened, and that whole thing just went away. It went to the back burner.
Along with billions that went missing as well.
Right, absolutely.
Yes, all the gold in one of those, one of the buildings, one of the Twin Towers, gold bars, et cetera, and I happen to know somebody who actually had a situation where he was a photographer at the time and shot footage of these. So what happened? Where did that go?
I tend, Alan, to listen to our listeners a great deal, and when you're in the UFO subject, and there are some people that come and they come to an event where we're live at, and they just want to tell you what happened to them or to their brother or to their father, or what happened at work, or what happened when they were little kids. And they come to you and they're bang, 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 bang. They just machine gun you. That's what I call it. They machine gun you to try to fit all this in because they're so used to, people turning away from them and not paying any attention to them, that when they come to these events, They think this is the place to let it all out and people will listen. I couldn't get any work done at any event that we go to if I sat and listened to everybody start to finish. I have to give them my card and tell them to email me or call me. And I love it when people come and tell me. But when To the Stars, to get to my point, when To the Stars comes online and they have these people from AATIP there, they release these videos, some that had already been released, some that hadn't. I've got to be honest with you. Tom DeLonge or no Tom DeLonge, To the Stars Academy has done more in getting the word out to the entire world about the subject of UFOs than MUFON's done in over 50 years. And I worked for MUFON for a decade and a little over a decade. But I mean, like, at the end of the day, I love a lot of the people in that organization, but when you go 40 years and you haven't produced anything more than you have for the public, honestly, I'm going to go on the record for the first time and say the executive director, Jan Harzan, at the Mutual UFO Network, in my opinion, is really just using MUFON as his own personal little retirement fund.
Whoa, Nelly.
Yeah, and you know, that's a big statement. That's a bold statement to make. I've often thought of when and where I would say that on the record in public. This is the first time I'm going to do it. I mean, it's just I've worked with him personally. I find Jan Harzan to be a very likable man. He's a very likable guy, and he's a very corporate minded guy, and I mean that in the best way possible. But at the end of the day, they are not doing a damn thing for the public, and the frustrations that have come from MUFON in their failures along the way have really been what Jan Harzan has been out to correct. I was gone from MUFON, and he came and personally called me and brought me back. But it paid for him to do so because I owned a media station, a radio station, a media outlet that, that gives them credibility. When I come back, it sort of nulls the crooked crap that they did when I left. And,
well said. And Maria Wilson Duff in chat is saying double amen race.
Well, I got to be honest. To the Stars Academy has brought the subject to those big, bold print headlines on the major newspapers that are very credible. You know, CNN and Fox and Washington, New York Times and Washington Post, all of them, have been talking. This year, 2019, 2018, have been 2 years that, honestly, the subject of UFOs has risen to the level of, although it doesn't happen much, but dinner table conversation, Alan.
Right. No, it has. And that's the most important thing. And I agree with you. A lot of people are critical of Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy, but I think that whether they want to play nice with the rest of us or not, it doesn't matter. They're getting things done. And I think you're right. They're stirring the waters and creating awareness that has not existed since the time of the 80s when Stanton Friedman and Kevin D. Randall and Charles Berlitz and all these people were writing these books, and the Roswell event hit. And then I remember watching Unsolved Mysteries, that episode when that aired on the Roswell crash, and it revolutionized the topic. And I haven't seen anything like that since then until 2017, December, when the New York Times article came out. And that was all due to the work of To the Stars Academy. And I think it's fantastic. There are things to be critical of, sure. But I mean, no one's perfect in this field. And it's funny, I was talking to Bill Skywatcher earlier for a Coffee and UFOs episode, and we were talking about that. The lack of unity and infighting. And it's funny, whenever I ask people, what do you think should change in ufology? It's universally the same answer. So I'm thinking, if so many people feel the same way, why isn't that getting done?
Yes, so I guess we could say this was like a major conversation starter at the very least. And a lot of, I observed from my actual duties as a broadcaster, I observed a huge reduction in what is known as the giggle factor, the snicker factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And Race, earlier you mentioned the events that you're at. You can't listen to everybody's story because you actually, have work to do. So I totally get that because people just need to get stuff off their chest. That said, tonight we are going to open the phone lines right now. So if you have something that you need to get off your chest, if you have an opinion about the ufological community, you can call in the Paranormal Radio app hotline 85 KGRA live, and Carole and I are here to listen to you, to hear what you have to say, because it matters. Because it's not just a handful of ufologists that lead, and everyone should just follow, right? It's the community, it's the feedback, and it's the input from all of you guys that make what they do even possible in the first place. So,
well said. That. Yeah, boots on the ground, actual factual people who have observed, etc. And that is, I think, where a lot of information lies, in the witnesses, and in their sincerity, in their passion. Race, that's what you refer to, how people want to get something off their chest, but they also want to share, and they want to somehow have their experiences be authenticated.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Carole, we have our first call, so I'm going to go to that now. We have Blue Orb from...
Oh, terrific.
Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Alan.
Hey, how are you?
We had so much trouble today, but it's okay. It all works out.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging. To watch.
Yeah.
I've got some... This has been an interesting year in the whole paranormal world. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We all feel the world is changing. The paranormal is becoming more normal every day.
Yeah.
I mean, even mainstream sources can talk about most of these topics without snickering for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though these phenomena were used to perform on stage for psychologists and physicists, they are real. They're being recognized as real. And it's becoming more apparent to everybody every day. In 1910, there were 97 million people in the United States. There were about 2 million geniuses. In 2010, there were like 6 million geniuses in the United States. Back in 1910, information traveled at the speed of a train, max. Now information travels at the speed of light all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did have telegrams.
That is true.
Yes, but that was...
However,
right. compared to now, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can have face-to-face conversations with people all over the globe. Now, flat earthers will have to get over that, but that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, unprecedented. Yes,
absolutely. And just think of all the changes that happened between 1910 and 2010, 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
In the next 100 years, it's going to be so much. It's going to be 10 or 100 times as much change.
Yeah.
In the next century as there was in the previous one.
But isn't it interesting that through all this time, as far as ufology goes, we're still really struggling with getting some hard evidence?
I don't think it's a phenomenon that really presents itself. It doesn't perform well on stage.
Oh, well said.
Yeah, stage fright. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And despite the problems that a lot of these changes have caused, I mean, yes, we've had our problems with agriculture and overfishing and overlogging. We've managed. It's been tough, but we've managed. And they've not it's not slowed the progress down, and I don't think it will in the future either. We'll manage to figure out a way to get past the rough spots. there are a few tiny groups that are fearful of change. We must not let them burn the world in their fear.
Right.
The ordinary people are waking up. We understand our greatest qualities and our deep moralities that we all share. And keeping those must be our goal for the future, for all our sakes.
Absolutely. And what do you think right now about the ufological community?
It's at a turning point that is beyond anything that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's out in the open. That's the main thing. It's the snicker factor and the you must have been drunk or on drugs factor.
Yeah.
Is suddenly gone. I've talked to a couple now. I'm new at this. I talked to Calvin
Parker,
and I talked to Calvin Parker, and I'm telling you, in those days, he ran because he did not want to be a public laughingstock.
Right, and for those that are listening, Calvin Parker had a close encounter with you. So
Pascagoula, right, Mississippi.
Correct.
Fishing with Charles Hickson. And I understand through the radio experience that I had talking with Calvin Parker, which was, I don't know, it just was, well, I don't have words to describe it, but I understand that
it was a wonderful interview, and you did a great job.
Oh, bless your heart, and thank you. Well, hey, you did too. And I just think that I understand what he said during that interview, that he was so not inclined to go public with this that he went to ground, literally,
yes.
and in the construction company that he owned, his wife signed the checks. No, his name was not on anything, and none of his neighbors even knew of his experience. That is how deeply he felt compelled to stay low profile.
But now I think in today's, but today, I mean, he's come out, and there are others who were just as hidden that have come forward and said, "This happened to me. This really happened to me," and they're not being laughed down. And now that those have come out, for every one of those that happened to, okay, if it hadn't been for somebody watching a police radio, the Pascagoula incident would never have made papers.
True.
So and for every one of those that managed to leak out or someone wanted to talk, there are probably 10 that we've never heard of, that people just stuck it in their back pocket and walked on with their lives. So I think we're looking at something that's going to be breaking things wide open.
Yeah,
at least I hope so. And
I think
the more information we have to work with, the closer we can come to the truth.
Oh, yes.
I think you're absolutely right that the times have changed and the giggle factor has certainly lessened. But there are still people out there that do giggle a little bit. But yes, I agree with you 100%. But also there are different forms of communication and online platforms and shows like this that simply did not exist decades ago.
Absolutely.
Not even 15 plus. Right, not even 15 plus years ago. So you have that. And I think also, to be honest, age. I think I can speak for myself, but I know that as you get older, I think most people agree you kind of care less about what other people think about you. You're just tired. And you're like, I just can't deal with that. I've got too much stuff I need to take care of. So I think that's a factor too. What about you guys?
Well, I know Libertas
just
tossed. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it is a factor with a lot of the witnesses that they've finished their lives, more or less, their public lives or whatever, and they're in a situation where they have a lot less to lose.
Yeah.
That's important. But I think the younger people that are coming up, they don't have that fear.
Right. Libertas just tossed into chat that the young people totally accept ufology, and they're more likely to laugh about the government.
Because they've grown up with this side of the story. A lot more than just it's just a bunch of drunks and crazy farmers out in the pasture.
Mm.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks so much for calling in, Blue Orb.
Thank you.
All right.
It's been fun.
Good night, Charles. Take care.
Good night.
All right. Take care, brother. See, now I wasn't sure if we should say Charles on the air.
Oh, oops. What did I do? Oh no. Well, someone can edit that out if it's
that's
not
fine.
good.
Fine. Charles has called in before, so I'm sure he's okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But yeah, so we have another caller coming up in a moment. But Carole, I do want to get your take before the clock, grabs us.
Yes.
We were kind of leading into this with Race a little bit. The Eric Davis leak and the Admiral conversation. Do you, and for all those listening, it was a conversation between Dr. Eric Davis, who has been involved with an investigative team at Skinwalker Ranch back in the 90s, run by Bob Bigelow.
Right.
So he's had an interest in the paranormal and ufological studies for a long time. And apparently this leaked memo of a conversation that he had with a Navy Admiral, Thomas Wilson, exposed this sort of clandestine relationship between EG&G, private companies, the government, and the recovery and development of crashed ET technology. Now, Richard Dolan in the springtime really covered this story a lot and got it out.
He did, yes.
He got the information from Grant Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were chatting today because I was trying to really nail down where Grant Cameron got his information.
Yeah, that's a tough one because certainly there is a perceived take, and I think it is a need to be protective of sources. But that's sort of like, I don't know, this thing that keeps occurring to me is that the old meme of, down at the popular watering hole, and it's like the phrase is, okay, what are we drinking tonight? Well, it's sort of mutated into a, who are we believing tonight?
Right. And these are photocopy memos.
Oh, yes, they are hard copies. But on the other hand, I'm totally on board for everything that points to the fact that it's now that we're acknowledging this in certain sets of people. But it's kind of how can we actually, even if we're looking at a document, how can we, the average bear, how can we discern that this is an authentic document? I know even as much as Stanton Friedman was behind the MJ-12 stuff, how can we substantiate this to ourselves?
Right, and I think that's the difficult thing, and I think with absolute respect for Richard Dolan, he had that earlier in 2015, the incident with Jaime Maussan.
Oh yes,
where this supposed mummy was alien body, and he was involved in that. Put his
Mexico City, right in May. Mm-hmm.
Right, he backed it up, and then it turned out it was just a mummified child. It had nothing to do with an alien body, and it was easily debunked as a theory, which I think hurt his credibility to some degree. So I guess I was surprised, and I'm not knocking him. We all make mistakes. I guess I was surprised that he was so self-assured that these documents are legit. Whereas I certainly take it with a grain of salt.
Oh, and of course that is the good way to be. I know that. I was really, when I did a little bit of research on who Jaime Maussan was, he became a journalist in Mexico when journalists were the equivalent of absolutely corrupt individuals. And he defied that and went forward. There are those who support him to the point where they believe he was misled. I don't know. Where do you weigh in, Alan?
I don't know. I'm pretty agnostic about it. So what I'm going to do is, but look, there was some revealing information like budgetary things where what was reported as being spent in these SAP, special access top secret programs were like way overblown. People can't keep track of where the money is going. So these are black budget projects that it's a fascinating read, the document itself, and the idea that yes, indeed, we are aware of extraterrestrial visitation. But I'm going to go to phone lines now. And Ron from Minnesota, you are on the air.
Hello, Ellen and Carol, and thank you, Rich.
Hello, Ronald Toltfar.
And how is everyone tonight? Happy holidays.
Good.
Yes,
Holidays.
right back at you.
Yeah. I had a question. I did a little show on Friday night a couple weeks ago about skepticism. And I have a hard time believing in UFOs unless I don't know if I ever want to touch one, but you know what I mean? Unless I have something, like the remote for the TV in my hand. I know the remote's real. It's there. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other side of that coin, you have the metaphysical world that says you're not really touching that item that you're holding on to. That's a whole other show, though.
Yeah,
but,
right,
but
exactly.
There's something about we're holding on to stuff through electrical impulses, or we're not really touching it. Okay, now that I don't get all that, but as far as the believing what you see and when you see it, can you really have that sure mental ability to know what you are looking at? When I took a couple of videos as I was walking around town the last warm days that we had, and I was taking the video at the blue sky, clear blue sky practically, and Andy sent me a message. Andy is in the UK, and he always watches my Facebook live streams, and he sent me a message and said, "Did you see that? In the sky, that kind of a gray dot in the blue sky. There was nothing there but this gray dot." And I didn't see it when I was shooting it because you can't see the screen in the daylight, in the sunshine. And so when I looked back on the video, sure enough, there was a gray dot in the sky right where Andy was saying it was. And it's not anything that anyone added. It was there in the sky, and you could see that. And I saw that another time on another video. And where I live, it's supposed to be a little hotbed for UFO sightings, but that's the only thing that I've seen that I could possibly claim is a UFO or something I don't know what it is. Every time I look at something flying in the sky, I go through checklists of what it isn't. It's not a helicopter, it's not. And then if it does come up with something, it looks like a helicopter, or it's a drone, or something like that, I figure it out about maybe 10 guesses, and I got it figured out. Maybe less than that, but.
The old process of elimination, yes. Yeah,
the checkpoint. Now, there might be a time when I'll get through my checklist and what the hell was that? And it's really not worth reporting because I don't know what it is. One thing was I was on the beach in San Diego back in the 80s, 85, I guess. Mm-hmm. I used to go to the beach when I looked a lot better than I do now. But anyway... But
we all. But go ahead.
I was looking up in the blue sky, and I saw these white or silvery things, probably half a dozen of them flying around. And this might be like over the area, like they're talking about the Catalina UFO thing,
Right.
And the island, there. And so I was in that general area on the mainland, though, on the beach, and I saw these things flying around, and I couldn't tell how high they were. I couldn't tell you how big they were. I couldn't tell you what shape they were. I could tell you that they were either white or they were silver because they were reflecting the sunlight. So I knew there was something like a white or silver. So what it was, I couldn't tell you. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a UFO. All right.
Right. The words unidentified, flying an object, and in your case, objects.
And when I looked up how high they were, I was thinking in my mind, well, it can't be seagulls because that's way too high for a seagull to be. I can tell that distance. And if they were a seagull, I wouldn't be able to see them because they'd be too small. That's how I knew it wasn't a seagull.
Right.
Okay? So, did that make any sense when you looked at something out, the size of something, when you can say, okay, it's not that, because I wouldn't be able to see it if it was that.
Right.
Like a Cessna airplane.
Mike Rogers, whenever I've spoken to Mike, he refers that always to snap triangulation, where he's just, looking at the nearest objects to him and making an estimate in his head as to the size of an object. But even then, like your perspective can be a little bit tricky. But I always love what Heidi Hollis says in her response to when people kind of doubt, if you've seen something crazy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know where you're going. Yep.
She's like, well, you gave me my license, didn't you?
Right. These are the same eyes I use to drive my car. Yes.
Yeah,
it's a great point Heidi Hollis makes. Yes.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Obviously, nothing's absolute, but yes, if somebody thinks that they saw something, if you trust me to drive my car or drive a tractor trailer or to drive a plane, then yes, my vision may not be perfect, but you should give me the benefit of the doubt, I would think.
Right. Unless you're a police officer or a pilot or some kind of military person.
Or a trained observer, right.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
Now, I got to say that with the benefit of doing what I do, it's my free time, but it's what I do on my daytime job, I guess. Not that I really work, but
all right.
I have the benefit of interviewing some interesting people. I got to talk to Terry Lovelace, and the last one I talked to was Calvin Parker on Friday.
Yes.
And the stories I'm hearing are just, really amazing. And they are helping my disbelief, by their story and how they're explaining it. And when you meet them in person, like when I saw Travis Walton at the, when I met you for the first time, Ellen, at the Pine Bush event. And, seeing Travis Walton there in person, it's like, he does exist. He really is there. So maybe a story, is true. Because you really don't know until you actually get to meet somebody. You can sense what they're feeling, what they're talking about, how they're reacting when they're talking about it, which most people are still a little bit upset that it happened.
Exactly. I've got a question. Go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say, it's like anything else. When you're there in person, it just makes it more real.
It does. That's who we are at this point in our human experience. Libertas asks a question, Ron, for you. Have you ever seen any of the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO flyover?
No, I was not born yet. Unless I was in the UFO.
Yes. But there is stuff available. There's footage of that.
Oh, okay.
And it was covered by I think Time Magazine, Life Magazine. It was a big whoop. I certainly was too young to remember that. Actually, except years later, because I started being very interested in this when I was like 12. That was real, as I recall. They were donut shaped, and just something that is in the history. I was listening to the end of the Martin Willis podcast right before this show, and he was talking with Stanton Friedman. Obviously not a live show, unfortunately. Rest in peace, dear Stanton. But it was really a very interesting thing in terms of what we can investigate now and how we have all of these search engines at our disposal to be able to do our own individual discernment.
Yeah, and then I got to meet with Eric Hartwig, a couple of years, couple of years for the Pine Bush event. And we talked one time, the first time we met, and we looked at the way that the building was and where a dome on the building was. And we had a building in front of us where we couldn't really see the dome behind it, but we had to establish in our minds as we were looking at that, is that dome on the first building? or the back building,
Right.
And
right.
not adjusting our location, but looking directly where we were at. We established that it had to be on the building behind it, not on the main building in front. So now the other thing that I have a question about, and I'm going to talk about a little bit tomorrow, is why can't we go light speed? Oh, that's a whole nother question.
Oh my gosh, that's a big question.
It is, and I do not have the scientific education. However, I just want to toss before you go. Libertas suggests that you should watch the John Mack interviews of the children from the Ariel School in Zimbabwe.
Okay. That's a good suggestion. Thank you, Libertas. Okay. All right. Well, thanks,
Thank
Ron,
you very
for
much,
calling in.
Alan.
Take care, Ron. See you later.
See you next time.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays to you, honey.
All right. Be well. Yeah. Oh, this is so nice. I feel like we've had the family on here tonight.
I know.
We've had Mac Barnes, we've got Ron, and Blue Orb, a.k.a. Charles. Sorry, the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, okay. It's too late, Charles. Okay.
I do want to continue on with my unparalleled ufological and paranormal partner in cryptid crime, Carole Carle.
Oh, gosh, that's heavy. I love it. And it's too late for me to plead any kind of plausible deniability. Okay, so go forward. Right.
I thought one of the other interesting turn of events this year was the fact that the Navy admitted, and interesting, this all came through FOIA acts, right? The Navy had admitted that, yes, AATIP was a real program that were investigating UAPs, unidentified phenomena, so on and so forth. And then later, another document came out countering that position, and that was only a month ago. So what's your take on how the Navy did a 180 there?
It is so convoluted. As much as I read and try to assess, again, I'm just Jane Doe, just the average bear on the street in a sense. And it's a funny thing because my gut says, and I don't know how comfortable my gut, my inners are with this, but it's sort of like, yes, it's scary, even sometimes to the point of being like terrifying, but it resonates to me in a thing where this is exactly actual, factual, and it's something we're supposed to pay great attention to.
Yeah, it is. But my fear is that behavior is the same sort of behavior we saw in the 1960s with the Condon Report, where the Army at that time really was changing its tune. On one hand, you would get an announcement that they're taking this seriously. Then on the next hand, it's, oh, no, there's nothing here. Look away.
No.
I really had thought that by 2017, leading up until this, about 6 months ago, that was really beginning to change, and that it was beyond recoil, that they couldn't backstep, that they would just, we're all in. They're not saying aliens existed, but they're saying, hey, yes, this is a real legitimate phenomena that we're investigating. And I just, you always want the president or whoever is higher up to step in, right?
Yes.
And it seems like someone in the middle are making these decisions where one person, for instance, if you look at the Roswell incident, right? I mean, Jesse Marcel, it was a qualified Army personnel, and he could identify, a silly weather balloon.
Yes.
And yet what he found on the ground was clearly, according to him, not a weather balloon. But then he was given orders to change that narrative.
Right. And I had the incredible privilege of talking several times on another network with Jesse Marcel III, who it was so interesting because he confirmed what I had seen. And my vibes were, okay, if you find a photograph of Jesse Marcel and he's holding this aluminum looking kind of thing, and I think he's sort of kneeling on one knee. You can see his face in the camera, and his eyes are very wide, and so the substantiation came from Jesse Marcel III, the grandchild, that his grandfather was pulled into this room, into this, I don't know, can we say press conference? Maybe that's a little too grand, but into this situation where he was told, okay, hold this up, and because we're going to prove this is nothing but an aluminum weather balloon. And the expression on his face, and in particular in his eyes, was like, WTF, this isn't what I planned on.
Right.
So, and there we go. And that would be, of course, the Roswell incident.
Right. You just threw me for a loop when you said
I'm sorry. Yeah. I never mean to.
I do want to add this, because even though technically this was at the end of 2018, it really gained a lot of traction, and that was Oumuamua.
Oh, yes.
And
the messenger, right. Mm-hmm.
Messenger asteroid that has its own form of propulsion, apparently, which science has yet to explain.
How does that work? Yes, okay.
Right. Avi Loeb of Harvard, he said, quote, "This is how science worked. We make a conjecture," and he made the conjecture that this could be an extraterrestrial probe. "And if someone else advances another explanation, we will compare notes. And the next time we see an object of this type, we will hopefully be able to tell the difference. That's the process by which science makes progress," end quote. And I thought that was beautiful, because when you get the pushback from hardcore skeptics, for lack of a better terminology, debunkers, if you will.
Okay.
It's basically saying that we're all crazy. We're just coming up with speculation. Well, that's what he's talking about. He said, we make a conjecture. You can swap that out with speculation to some degree, right? We're looking at a series of eyewitness accounts or data or facts, and we say, hey, this might have been a UFO encounter. This may have been a cryptid encounter. We get, those of us who entertain these ideas, we get labeled as unscientific, when all we're doing is presenting a possible explanation for something that somebody saw. And yet that's exactly what science does. It has a hypothesis. You have to start with an idea. It's not automatically an approved theory in science. So I find it a little frustrating sometimes when we kind of get the hard end of the stick on that.
And I don't know what is the answer for that, because where are we coming from in terms of what we need, what we feel needs to happen, and what's actually happening? And again, the word you used a while back, evidence.
Yes, evidence. Exactly. And that's what we're looking at, the best evidence we have, and making, a conjecture based on that. And we only have minutes left, Carol, and I wanted to add this other piece of news that, again, it really kind of got traction at the end of 2018.
Yes.
But I think is really, really profound. And that is in Jeremy Corbell's documentary, Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, there is a bioscanning machine that was used at Area 51. I think it was S4 or S2. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. That was unknown to anyone until recently, except for one person, and that's Bob Lazar. And Bob Lazar had described back when, in what was it, late 80s, early 90s, that this bioscanning machine was a rudimentary early version. What basically it did, you put your hand on it, and it sort of instant X-rayed and measured the length of the bones in your hand.
Whoa!
That was the security, and when he shared this, people thought there's no such thing. He's just making this up. Well, decades later, we find out that in fact was being used there at the time. And I thought that was one of the most profound revelations that was talked about in 2019.
Yes, the strange year in review. And that is amazing. And that needs to be, I think that needs to be brought forward and made a lot more public. It's kind of obscure. It's sort of, and see, here's that old thing of, preaching to the choir. There are people who would say, oh yeah, I felt that a long time. But how do we spread the word, so to speak?
Yeah. I don't know. And it's funny because sometimes, like you're right, it's one of those things that get to be obscured, and yet it's one of the best pieces of evidence out there to support what others would call an outlandish idea, purported by Bob Lazar. And I think it really adds to his credibility. And
it does. And it also adds to, all of these educational bodies that say, we don't know who Bob Lazar is. He wasn't ever here, part of us, blah, blah, blah. That sort of, it plays into that thing that shouldn't probably remain as a conspiracy theory, that if indeed Bob Lazar, and I lean toward his authenticity these days, just spontaneously, that would be the reason why all of his credentials, etc., were wiped, expunged.
Right. Yeah. Well, Carole, that's it. We're at the end.
Oh my gosh, how quickly.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm glad we got to do a little bit of a review with you for this past year. I'm so glad everyone called in and you stuck with us tonight, despite our technical
yes.
glitches. We'll just call it growing pains. We're getting there, and it's going to be worth it. I promise you. We are in good hands. And if you want to find out more about Carole Carle, you can go to KGRAradio.com and check out Behind the Obsidian Curtain, Fridays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Carole, happy holidays and happy New Year if I don't speak with you in person before then.
Yes, and back to you and Svete, and just have a wonderful bunch of holiday celebrations. This is a unique platform, and I just feel that it's an amazing time to be involved in this particular discipline on planet Earth.
Yep. Oh, and that reminds me, I will just say that someone suggested that you move to New York.
Oh, really?
You will be so welcome here.
Oh, well, that's fascinating because that's I can't. That's a whole other show. But yes, I am called to that. I'm on the West Coast. I sort of sometimes feel I'm on the wrong coast, but we shall see what this year brings. Thank you so much, Alan, for giving me the time.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody listening tonight. This is our last live show of 2019. And look forward to next week's Christmas Eve special with Ted Peters, theologian pastor, and we will be talking about the actual history of Christmas, religious, metaphysical, mythological, and a little bit of Santa Claus as well. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio, 8 to 10 p.m. Tuesdays, Eastern Standard Time on KGRA Radio, your official contact for the best in alternative talk. And now, stay tuned for Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, and special thanks to KGRA producer Race Hobbs. Until next time, live in the mystery.